All right, guys, so happy asynchronous Wednesday. So I'm going to walk you through the asynchronous assignment for today. We've spent the last couple days talking about, we finished up with World War I, and then we got to talking about what is the condition of Europe after World War I. So we know that it's unstable. We know that there's, economic difficulties as a result of the Great Depression and the damage to all the infrastructure. And in the case of Germany, we know that it is all the harsh punishments kind of put on them by the Treaty of Versailles that has made survival particularly difficult for them. So now we are going to get into the direct causes of World War II. So we had World War I, then we had the Between the Wars period, and now we're heading into World War II. So some of the stuff that we talk about here, we've already kind of touched on, but we're going to kind of try to, clarify exactly what the causes of World War II are and how some of these previous circumstances that we've talked about, like the Great Depression, economic difficulties, the Treaty of Versailles, how this all kind of works together to bring about World War II. So I'm going to kind of cruise through this. You guys can pause it as necessary and just make sure you get all the notes. All right, so here we go. So like we said, the Treaty of Versailles kind of imposes really, really strict penalties on Germany. Some would argue that the penalties were far too strict. The reason that they would argue that is because in order for any country to exist reasonably, they would essentially have to break the terms of the treaty. Now, I think we could all agree that it's reasonable idea for a country to have a military, right? So, disbanding the military entirely and stripping it down is probably not, a viable option, but that is one of the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. So it is imposed upon Germany nonetheless. Couple that with the extreme reparations. They have to pay all this money back for the destruction of Europe, and paying for their part in World War I is extreme also. So, long story short, if Germany is going to kind of just regain their former glory, or at least exist on a kind of reasonable level with their European counterparts, they're going to have to break the terms of this treaty, and breaking the terms of the treaty is obviously going to be problematic, right? So there's a couple of important things that lead directly to the beginning of war. And the first one is this idea of appeasement. So we mentioned that during the Treaty of Versailles, some of the penalties that were put on Germany were that they were going to have some of their land stripped from them. They were going to lose colonies that, were in far off places, but they were also going to lose some territory from actual Germany, right? So the first order of business here for Hitler is that he's going to demand the return of some of these territories that were taken from Germany. Hitler refers to this as what he calls Lebensraum, which is a German word that means living space. So Hitler claims that, in the industrial kind of reality that Germany lives in, they need space to expand, with their population, and that they should be allowed to have some of this land back for this purpose. So the Prime Minister of England at the time is a guy named Neville Chamberlain, and Hitler is demanding this land back. And Neville Chamberlain decides, I don't want to fight another war with Germany, so let's let Hitler have some of this land back. And this is a policy known as appeasement, which we will define as giving into the demands of a dictator in order to avoid military conflict. So the idea is that Hitler's asking for this land, let's just give it to him and then hope he goes away. But in reality, your giving in to Hitler is having the opposite effect of what Neville Chamberlain thought it would have. Neville Chamberlain thought he would give Hitler this land back and then Hitler would just leave everybody alone after he got what he wanted. But in reality, giving in to the demands of Hitler empowers Hitler to go even further. So Hitler basically says to himself, man, that was easy. I just demanded this land back and they just handed it right over. I wonder what else I could get. Okay, so this policy of appeasement empowers Adolf Hitler to continue pushing the envelope and continue trying to take back, the things that he wants to take back. He knows that the other countries of Europe are not particularly interested in armed conflict, and they are pretty quick to give in to his demands. So it stands to reason that he might be able to make some other demands that could be met. So this is a direct cause of World War II, and arguably the greatest one. Another aspect of, causes for World War II is the League of Nations, and more specifically, the failure of the League of Nations. So after World War I, Woodrow Wilson, I believe, decides to form the League of Nations. This is an international group that is supposed to be like all the big European countries kind of getting together. And the idea is that they will all work together to maintain peace and stability throughout Europe. Even though this is an idea of the American government, America doesn't join. So that's a major problem. So the most powerful country after World War I kind of concludes, it is the United States is widely regarded as one of the most powerful countries, if not the most powerful country in the world. And the U.S.'s lack of participation in this League of Nations kind of undermines its authority to begin with, right? There's other problems with it. In order for the League of Nations to take action, they have to vote unanimously. So all these member nations, if they decide to punish a nation in Europe, they have to vote unanimously to do that, right? So if there's 10 countries in the League of Nations, all 10 have to vote to take an action. Well, unanimous voting and consensus amongst all these groups is never going to happen. So you could forget that. The other thing is that the League of Nations does not have its own military. So if and when they do decide to take action against the nation, they need to then ask member nations to donate troops and supplies. So there's a lot of kind of structural things that are wrong with the League of Nations, and its failure lends directly to the beginning of World War II. So this political cartoon that you see here with Uncle Sam kind of resting his head on what's called the Keystone, and it says USA. This is the last piece that would complete this bridge, and the United States refuses to kind of put it there, right? So this is a political cartoon that kind of outlines, what the main kind of factors are here with the League of Nations. So just to wrap up, when we talk about the causes of World War II, we're really going to talk about three things in particular. We're going to talk about appeasement and the idea that European nations are going to give in to the demands of Hitler. We're going to talk about the failure of the League of Nations. And then last but not least, and this is kind of an easy one, we're going to talk about Germany and, Hitler's just straight up invasion of Poland. So the failure of the League of Nations, appeasement, and kind of the idea that appeasement empowers Adolf Hitler to continue acting irresponsibly, that's going to lead to Nazi Germany just straight up invading Poland, and then it's off and running from there with the beginning of the war. Once Poland is invaded, Hitler has invaded a sovereign nation, and the rest of Europe is not going to stand idly by and allow that to happen. And the invasion of Poland will be kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's what's going to propel Europe and the rest of the world into World War II. So that's what we're looking at today. So for your asynchronous assignment, you guys are going to take a look at 3 different documents, one on each of these factors here. You're going to answer some questions on each of these factors, and just make sure you submit that prior to midnight tonight so that your attendance is counted as being present. All right. So I will have virtual office hours as usual. So just check the stream page for those virtual office hours. So if you need help with this assignment or with anything else, or you guys have any other questions or concerns, you can see me in virtual office hours, or you can write me an email. So enjoy the rest of your asynchronous Wednesday, and I'll see you guys back here again live on Thursday tomorrow. So have a good one.